into it is that this year has been full of the highest highs. And
Blake Lively sat in the witness chair, the gallery's hush hanging over her like a weight. Her face was composed, yet her eyes betrayed a storm of tension. Across the courtroom, Justin Baldoni watched, impassive. The judge adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. For months, this courtroom had been the battleground for a war of narratives. Lively had accused Baldoni of misconduct and retaliation. He countered with defamation claims and promises to expose the real story. Headlines and social media had framed them as adversaries of truth, locked in a war of reputations. But now, in this moment, something had shifted. Lively's legal team had filed a new motion, one that seemed, to many watching, like an admission of weakness. Your Honor, before proceeding further, Lively's attorney began, voice steady but somber. My client is willing to withdraw certain claims and concede that some of her allegations cannot be sustained under the evidence as presented. A faint murmur rippled through the courtroom. Baldoni's lawyer raised an eyebrow. The judge leaned forward. To the public, this might look like a surrender. To insiders, it reeked of desperation. Over the weeks, whispers had circulated, internal memos showing her team lacked corroborating witnesses, text messages that contradicted sworn statements, and third-party accounts that undermined the narrative she had pushed so publicly. Lively's corner now faced a choice: dig in and risk humiliation in cross-examination, or pivot to damage control. As the judge considered the motion, Baldoni's counsel stood, eyes cool. Your Honor, he said, we object. This sudden retreat is not an admission in itself, but it signals that the plaintiff's case is unraveling. We reserve the right to explore every inconsistency and misstatement Ms. Lively has made, not only in filings but also in sworn testimony. The tone was not gentle. It was calculated. From that moment, the courtroom narrative shifted. No longer was this about a star bravely confronting power. Now it was about credibility, about who could be trusted. And for Blake Lively, the gamble had just grown much higher. The desperate attack. Later that afternoon, in a flurry of motions and filings, Lively's team launched what many described as a counterblitz. They accused Baldoni of using private communications and hidden financial arrangements to control narratives, of coercing witnesses to stay silent, even of engaging in a smear campaign to discredit women who might support her. The language was sharp, almost vindictive. They called it a necessary step to protect the truth. It smelled of desperation. The courtroom's atmosphere turned electric. Media seats leaned. Blake Lively sat in the witness chair, the gallery's hush hanging over her like a weight. Her face was composed, yet her eyes betrayed a storm of tension. Across the courtroom, Justin Baldoni watched, impassive. The judge adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. For months, this courtroom had been the battleground for a war of narratives. Lively had accused Baldoni of misconduct and retaliation. He countered with defamation claims and promises to expose the real story. Headlines and social media had framed them as adversaries of truth, locked in a war of reputations. But now, in this moment, something had shifted. Lively's legal team had filed a new motion, one that seemed, to many watching, like an admission of weakness. Your Honor, before proceeding further, Lively's attorney began, voice steady but somber. My client is willing to withdraw certain claims and concede that some of her allegations cannot be sustained under the evidence as presented. A faint murmur rippled through the courtroom. Baldoni's lawyer raised an eyebrow. The judge leaned forward. To the public, this might look like a surrender. To insiders, it reeked of desperation. Over the weeks, whispers had circulated, internal memos showing her team lacked corroborating witnesses, text messages that contradicted sworn statements, and third-party accounts that undermined the narrative she had pushed so publicly. Lively's corner now faced a choice: dig in and risk humiliation in cross-examination, or pivot to damage control. It smelled of desperation. The courtroom's atmosphere turned electric. Media seats leaned forward. The gallery's chatter stifled itself. Baldoni's lawyer responded with calm dismissals, calling the claims speculative, lacking foundation, and dangerously broad. He asked that the judge strike them as being beyond the scope of the dispute currently before the court. In her next testimony, Blake leaned into the attack. She described how she had been pressured to stay silent early, how she alleged that Baldoni's team had used social media platforms to spread insinuations, and how certain messages she'd sent to trusted advisors were being mischaracterized. She named names, cited phone logs, and claimed that the director had orchestrated a behind-the-scenes campaign to make her look irrational, unstable, or unprofessional. But the pivot had a cost. Under cross-examination, lines were drawn sharply. The opposing counsel pulled up draft texts, comparing versions, noting revisions. He showed email chains where Lively's own team seemed to strategize narratives. He questioned gaps in memory, inconsistencies between public statements and private ones, missing witnesses who should have seen or heard things she claimed. The camera angle on some video evidence contradicted her description of movement and gestures. Each time, the phrase echoed, "How do you explain this discrepancy?" Or, "Did you intentionally misstate that to the public?" Occasionally, Lively's voice tightened, once her eyes flickered. But her resolve held. "The lie about me." Then came the bombshell. During her testimony, Blake made a statement about you, a person she claimed had been a confidant, a witness, or a source of some support during the period in question. She asserted that you had seen a message, heard a conversation, or otherwise corroborated a detail favorable to her side. She said you had told her X and used that statement to reinforce her version of events. But in private, you had never said such a thing. Perhaps you'd been misquoted, or your name had been used to lend weight to her claims without your consent. Regardless, in that moment, the courtroom caught fire. Baldoni's counsel pounced. They requested an immediate sidebar. They demanded to subpoena your messages, your records, your devices. They demanded you appear. The judge, sensing the gravity, granted the request and ordered you to be made available. In the courtroom confrontation that followed, you were brought in. Under oath, asked point blank, "Did you ever say to Ms. Lively that you witnessed or heard what she described?" You replied clearly, "No, I did not." Silence echoed for a heartbeat. Then the room erupted, cameras flashed, attorneys conferred, the judge admonished the gallery. Lively's attorney's face tightened. She was forced to admit, under oath, that her earlier claim about you was untrue. She attempted to recover with qualifying language, misremembered, suggested, inaccurate transcription, but the damage was done. The press would later call it a lie, a fabrication, a breakdown in credibility, aftermath, reputation in ruins. When the hearing adjourned, the media circus picked up speed. Headlines across outlets read, "Lively's credibility questioned," "Star's testimony implodes," "Fabricated witness claim exposed," and "Courtroom retreat. Is the whole case collapsing?" Inside the legal world, whispers circulated. If she lies about you, what else has she misrepresented? Lively attempted to regroup. Later that evening, on social media, she posted a carefully worded statement. She acknowledged errors in recollection and framed them as human mistakes rather than deliberate lies. She affirmed commitment to the pursuit of truth, invited further supporting testimony, and decried the atmosphere of intimidation and smear she claimed Baldoni's team had orchestrated to distract from the real issue. But the tone was defensive. It lacked the boldness of earlier statements. Baldoni's camp, sensing momentum, began filing motions to exclude large swaths of her evidence, to compel sanctions for false statements, and to call key witnesses who might expose further inconsistencies. The judge, growing impatient, asked both sides to submit sealed affidavits assessing the credibility of their witnesses and the risk of perjury. The schedule, once moving at a deliberate pace, now threatened to accelerate. The judge warned the parties, "If you continue litigating through leaks and media attacks, I will push the trial." In private chambers, Lively's legal team scrambled. They tried to locate behind-the-scenes support, witnesses who could reinforce her claims, analysts to challenge the admissibility of Baldoni's counterarguments. They drafted new motions, asked for extensions, and strategized risk mitigation. Some colleagues urged a partial settlement or withdrawal of certain claims to preserve her reputation. Others pushed to double down, arguing that backing down now would be seen as a defeat. Lively herself struggled in internal deliberations. Does she stay and fight, risking further unraveling, or withdraw and control the narrative later? A turning point or the beginning of the end? Days passed. The court announced it would hold a special evidentiary hearing to address Lively's contradictory statements. Experts would weigh in. Depositions would be reopened. Key documents unsealed. The public awaited. Lawyers refined their positions. Reporters speculated. For Blake Lively, what had started as a bold confrontation had now become a tightrope walk between vindication and collapse. She had attacked her co-star, made sweeping accusations, and invoked your name to bolster her case, and in doing so, had crossed into peril when her claim was proven untrue under oath. Was this the moment she finally admitted defeat? Not outright. But in conceding parts of her claim and undermining her own logic, she had signaled vulnerability. The desperate attack against Baldoni now looked like a counterpunch thrown in crisis, not confidence. And the lie about you, publicly proven perjury or at least misrepresentation, became a scar on her credibility. In the weeks ahead, the courtroom would decide whether this unraveling would doom her entire case, or whether she could still thread a path to partial victory. But for the public, the narrative had shifted. No longer solely about harassment claims, the story was now about trust, truth, and the fragile currency of reputation. At the next hearing, she would walk back into court, haunted by the memory of that moment when she invoked your name untruthfully. The gallery would watch. The press would pounce. And in that theater of law, one false step might seal the rest of her fight. If you like, I can polish this further, add more emotional tension, or shift perspective. Yours, hers, Courtroom Media. Do you want me to revise or expand it in a particular direction?